In an earlier video, I talked about how we could use law of cosines to find a missing side. In this video, I'd like to talk about how we could use law of cosines to find a missing angle. Law of cosines is really most useful to us when we have all three sides of a triangle. Perhaps something like this. And we want to know an angle. I'll just pick one. Let's just say we wanted to know this angle. Well, obviously, our angle is part of our law of cosines. It is imperative that whatever angle we're searching for, we look straight across from it, and this becomes our C in our formula. That side that crosses from the angle, that needs to be the one that's on the left of the equal sign. So after that, once you say, okay, this has to be 9, the other two sides, the order really doesn't matter. So we just say 20 squared plus 24 squared minus 2 times 20 times 24 times the cosine of C. Now, it really is up to you how you'd like to proceed. If you'd like to actually type these numbers in and figure them out, that's not a bad start. Another thing you could do is you could actually start moving things over. You could say, well, I could subtract over a 20 squared, a 24 squared. Since this whole thing is being multiplied by cosine C, I could divide by this negative thing right here. For this first example, I'm just going to figure out what each of these pieces are. What I mean by that is, 9 squared is 81. 20 squared is 400. 24 squared I typed in is 576 minus 2 times 20 times 24 is 960, like that. So now I can add those two numbers together, 976 minus 960 cosine C. Well, I would just subtract over the 976 and get negative 895 equals negative 960 cosine C. Divide both sides by negative 960. I'm going to leave that for a second. If you'll remember from law of sines, the way we get rid of a cosine, so we just have C equals, is we do the inverse cosine. So if I do the inverse cosine to both sides, it gets rid of it here, and I'd have the inverse cosine like that. Let's type that in together. Okay, so I'm going to do second cosine, and then we're going to have negative 895 divided by negative 960. Hit enter, and there we are, 21.2 degrees. Now, similar to my previous video about law of cosines, I just want to point out that now we have established a pair, an angle and a side across from it pair, so that we can now use law of sines. So we could fill out the rest of these angles. If we said, well, what's this angle? We could say, well, we know that the sine of 21.2 divided by 9 is equal to the sine of that missing angle divided by 20, and we could now use law of sines. Just like when you use law of cosines for a side, you shouldn't have to use law of cosines more than once. Once you have found an angle, you should be able to just use that angle to get to your law of sines. Let's do another example. All right. One thing I just want to point out before we solve this problem, you will see some teachers, some textbooks say, why not just do all of the algebra before we do anything and just, say, bring the a squared over through subtraction, bring the b squared over through subtraction, divide by negative 2ab, and you'd have c squared minus a squared minus b squared divided by negative 2ab, and then you could just take the inverse cosine of your answer and you'd be done. Fair. That's absolutely fair. I don't usually necessarily do that because then it feels like we have a second formula to memorize. But you certainly can do that. You could do all of your work before you plug any numbers in. That's very fair. Okay. I'm going to do this problem, though, the same way I did it. Please remember, the angle we're looking for has to be across from our C. That's the only important thing we need to establish. Okay, that's going to be our C. So we're going to have 18 squared equals the other two sides. It doesn't matter what order we go in. 17 squared. Okay, I'm going to just make a quick pass through where I actually say, okay, 18 squared is 324. 7 squared is 49. 15 squared is 225. 2 times 7 times 15 on my calculator is 210. And you'll see, I mean, I'm now going to start subtracting things around. I'm going to add the 49 and 225. So let's do that first. So I'm going to subtract 274 on both sides. It's going to be 50. I'm going to divide by negative 210. And then, in order to get rid of the cosine, I'm going to use inverse cosine. Whenever you're doing solving for an angle, you're going to end up using that inverse trig function. All right, so we're going to do second cosine 50 divided by negative 210 and 103.8 degrees. And now we have that established pair that we could use law of sines to find anything else we might need to find. If this video helped you, please like and subscribe for more geometry help.